Now, about control, you know how conductors are control freaks and how, and in the composition you can. So I try not to be controlling here, but honestly, was that really the case?
Uh, Last week when you were saying that you were giving us total freedom, I was thinking, oh, okay. I mean, there was, of course, there was a lot of freedom, but at the same time, you give us something to relate to. So it's not total freedom. I mean, we are not working on nothing. We are answering to something that we are listening.
Good, then I'm still myself. Okay.
Having said that.
And teachers and Deepish, you want to talk about the visuals of Dennis' episode, the one we saw tonight?
I'll just say briefly, I don't want to give too many hints, but every musician is going to have a slightly different way that we approach it. And of course, the way we approach it has to do with the underlying music from you, the track that has been composed that we had longer to work with, but also just some inspirations that we got from the way each musician interpreted the piece. So of course, percussion has a certain sound to it. There's some elements which to us sound like raindrops. And of course, there's quite a literal interpretation, but also I think in the abstract sense, it's nice to have a theme for each piece of music. And that's one thing that there will be throughout the piece, is that each different musician will have a theme. And we want them to be different, and we want them to feel and look different. So it's not like every video is going to follow the same pattern. Deepesh?
The whole thought process of coming up with like a theme, a visual motif for every performance started at Pavan itself. While Tejas and I were recording, during the breaks, we would talk and like infer. I would give him like suggestions and stuff. So for example, with Dennis, while I was listening to him do perform, I imagine I wanted a video where it had these divisions, because I felt like the music itself had these portions. And then slowly you can see in the music itself, in the end, all these different percussion instruments come together, right? So we want to match that visually as well.
Yeah, because a set of drums has natural divisions within it. Like in a set of drums, every piece of the drum kit is separate from every other. So that is an element that we're trying to reflect in the music. Whereas when you see the flute, it's going to be totally different, because the flute is not an instrument that's divided into 20 different parts. So as non-musicians, we're just interpreting it in our own way. The other thing I can say is that we found it very interesting listening to Robert's piece of music by itself, and then listening to it with the improvisations on top of it, and the ways that you get a different feeling in those situations. That's quite interesting.
And Dennis, you want to ask something to Deepish or to Tejas?
Yeah. Oh, so how long does it take to put all the videos together? I mean, just my segment. How long does it take?
Every video is a bit different, but it's definitely hours and hours and hours to do even a short video, because of choosing between all the footage, thinking of how we're going to put it together. It's not a fast process. I would say editing is a little bit like creating a whole new piece of work, because even when you have all the shots, the editing is still something totally different on top of that.
Okay.
Like we want, sorry, just to like add on to what they just said, we want to make sure that whatever we add on to our videos is deliberate. Like there's a reason for that shot existing. There's a reason why it looks like that. Some editors don't work like that. Some editors would just put all the good shots, or they'll just, so, but we want to make sure that there's a reason, like, or we have our own subjective reason for that shot to exist. So that's the way we edit. And we are almost like, we like to comb through details. That's why we take a lot of time. Like very, very minute things that probably no one will notice, because we watch the videos again and again and we start seeing things. So the devil's in the details. We want to make sure the devil's not there at all.
It's the same for us musicians. I'd like to ask John, my friend John, who is always very sensitive and articulate. To, I don't know, John, you have something. You saw it tonight, right? Yes. I can't hear you.
It was a reminder that film is an editor's art, and this is very different from, as musicians, we're probably used to archival filming, and even if it's artistic archival filming, that is a spot here, a tint here, a coloration there, a sweeping movement here, a batting of the eyelashes there, but it's archival. And this is clearly not archival. So it puts, and I noticed it more today because there was a living musician, you know, Dennis, and congratulations, Dennis.
Thank you, sir.
It felt really beautifully precise, that your intentions were very clear, and what you wanted to do, you did.
Yeah.
And I really like that. But it really felt that ultimately it went into the hands of the editing. And so that for me brought up new issues, new questions that would not come up in an existential, in a non-existential archival viewing, right? So when you watch an archival performance of musicians or dancers, it's the same thing, Sufri, isn't it? That for dance, a dance concert or dance performance that is archival, it only captures what you do. It's not supposed to add to it so much, right? So for me, the new question that came up is, who is this person? It's a very existential question. Who is this musician? What is this musician's relationship to what we're seeing? Does he hear it? Is it conscious? Is this film thing, this water thing, this design, who is it? Is it me? Is it the editor? Who is the editor? Who are my eyes that are seeing it? And who is this person? That for me was a very big question. And who's controlling who? Or is the person oblivious to it? Or is the person controlled? And particularly there was a place where you disappeared, Dennis, because you had a space of silence. Silence is beautiful. So for the musician or the dancer, silence means you don't do anything. But in this film version, silence means you disappear. And that has a whole new meaning. It's like, why did he disappear, right? And then I don't know if it was out of a kind of a playfulness, but you captured a woman in her black mask. I don't know who she was. She's like mystery woman. Who is she? It's like an Alfred Hitchcock film, and the camera goes for 2 seconds on a doorknob that turns, and then it moves away, and you're thinking, who's behind the door?
She is the assistant of Gao Yang and Rebecca at Pavan Studio. She's the assistant.
But I hope we see her again next week. I hope there is a plot there, and there's a story behind it.
She is the muse.
I mean, visually, she does look very interesting. That's what we felt, just in that position and being repeated on both sides. So, yeah.
It's a reminder how in film, and it's true in music and dance, but I think particularly film, which is completely a visual medium. Because, I mean, I'm going to say something very obvious. With film, you're watching with your eyes. It still goes to your brain. And your eyes are counting photons, you know, but when you're listening to something, it goes in a different place. Dance is eyes, but it's not just eyes. It's somatic. I watch dance almost physically. It's a somatic experience. So it's not, for me, it's not just a visual thing. But a filmic experience is a visual thing, which is interesting why it seems to also beg for music, because it's feeding into other senses. So when you put this question of this woman, she actually becomes a foil to Dennis, what is their relationship? Are they related? What are they doing after the film? What are they doing before we saw it? But film asks these questions though. That's the nature of film, to play with everything that you don't see. And that's why I said it's an editor's art.
But I like the idea of ambiguity in the sense of who controls who. Actually, I think in this collaboration, everybody controls a bit everybody who is controlled by everybody.
Or no one is
Oh, yes. And I like this ambiguity.
But we don't even know if they are being controlled. Because there's not a stated relationship. You don't see the thing, Dennis. You don't see the music. You're oblivious to it. It's like another dimension, a parallel universe or something.
And Soufri, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I've watched the videos from last week and also from today. It's also very interesting, like for the editors, like when you go to the rehearsal space and then you see whatever that is being produced by all of us artists, and then the moment when you go into your studio and then you start to put things together, like how do you actually negotiate between whatever that you've seen, and then after that you want to put it into visuals, into like a set presentation. So it's something that, like, I'm interested to know, how do you actually kind of negotiate that before and during that studio process itself? Yeah, because for me, like what I see on screen is actually the final product, but I'm also interested to know, like, how do you negotiate that process from the studio at that moment in time when you see it physically, and then after that you portray into a film presentation. Yeah.
So one thing I'll say before Deepesh will also give his own perspective, but one thing I'll say is that actually Deepesh already mentioned it, but I want to highlight it more. It's about intentionality. So there are many different ways you can make a film, because there's no longer any limit to how much footage you can take. Back when we actually, like, my dad was a filmmaker and he used to film on celluloid, and then you had to edit it by hand, and to physically edit a film, you had to cut the film and then tape it back together. So back then people were much more intentional about the shots they took. And what I've noticed over time is that as everybody has access to film, there is a new method of filming where you just film as much as possible in every possible direction, and then you hope that something will come out of it. And there's some benefit to that, but we also try to make sure that we already have some kind of plan and that we're taking shots and specific concepts. Like I said, the one thing that as non-musicians you would notice about a drum set is that the percussionist has to move between many pieces of instruments. They're never in exactly the same place. Each of those instruments has a separate sound. So that is where the idea of separate shots moving across the field of the film came from. And you'll see, again, when you see the flute one, obviously we don't have the same concept for that because it's a different kind of instrument. So the one thing I will say, like, this is when I teach my students at NAFA as well, is try not to just shoot a lot of random footage, because then when you edit it, it's going to be a nightmare because you don't actually know what you are trying to do. So we tend to have some concept that we're interested in for each piece and for each, like, the visual aspect of the instrument and also how the music sounds. Deepesh?
Yeah, so I actually loved what John was talking about, so I'd like to bring that in as well, and even to answer Soufri. So I think especially in this project, it's like the inspirations are decentralized, if that makes sense. So when we are listening, like, yeah, if you think about water with drums, it's like, it's just a straightforward meaning. But when I was actually listening to Dennis play the drums at Pavan, water came to my mind, and because I could hear something. So and also it's almost like, especially as an editor or a filmmaker, where you are making films, you're making a visual presentation of someone else's work. there's the aspect of respect. You have to respect the artists and their intentions and not go somewhere else, if that makes sense. And you don't want to remove their contribution or like so. So there's this always like back and forth, and like when we're editing the film, we also like look at Dennis, and we all like, for example, when working for Roberto's the upcoming film, I actually watched Roberto how he plays the flute and like everything that goes on with him, and we want to replicate that in film, because film is about getting in. Like if you compare film with like stage plays, for example, film is about getting up close and personal, like, and you want to amplify that personal aspect and get that out. And by the way, when I'm editing, I take some short breaks and I listen to Singapore Symphony Orchestra. So and then suddenly I'm editing Robert, and I see my video of symphony, and I'm like, wait a minute, is that Robert? Robert, oh sorry, no, Robert. I was like, whoa. So it's so cool to see, like, oh, I've been listening to Roberto playing the flute without even knowing it.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else to share, or we wrap the evening?
Yeah, I like the part that you brought out the water. So the water probably comes from, came from the East Coast Park, because I literally have to bring one of my instruments, go to the East Coast Park to practice, because I can't practice at home. I have to go to somewhere to practice. So probably the water comes from East Coast Park.
Interesting.
Do you actually do that? That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, I did because
wow.
I can't practice at home,
Yeah,
I have to go
too
somewhere.
loud, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's also part of my challenge. Yeah.
We should
So,
have known this. Maybe Tejas and Deepesh would have been following you.
oh, maybe, yeah. So for my challenge or the challenges that I faced was because I cannot practice at home, so I use air drumming. So from the air drumming transition to the actual instruments, that's a challenge, because it's about hands-on, it's about the texture, it's about the volume, it's about the velocity. It's just totally different. So so those are my challenges that I face. So I was quite stressed before the recording for that reason, the air drumming transition to actual playing.
But there is a theatrality, like, I'm not going to say Dennis is a dancer, but somehow you dance with the instruments, isn't it, Sufri? There is a
so it's very natural. It's very natural for me to do that.
That's not a criticism.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, so it's like so I'm totally two different persons. So when I talk, I'm just like that. But when I start playing, I'm another person. It's just different. I'm so into it, and I just express it. My body speaks. My movement speaks. It's no longer Dennis. It's someone else. The moment I say let's do it, when I go into the music, and it's not Dennis anymore. So I like that part, that I can transform to another person just within that seconds. Yeah, it's not easy thing, It's really have to set in and then let's do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Like even I think Tejas and I noticed that with like every musician, there is almost this metamorphosis that happens when we are like editing. Like we can see they're like just standing by, and then once they start playing, there's this whole new character.
Yeah.
And for example, for Dennis, like one of my favorite things that you do is when the piece is done, your hands are up in the air and you slowly bring them down. Like there's this like weight, which most people wouldn't even add. You know what I mean? Like you made our lives easier. You actually added cinematic flair to your performance.
Yeah. Visual cues and cinematic flair seem to be something that
I didn't plan what I'm going to do. Like I'm going to raise my hand. It's just at the moment I need to do those stuff. It's just natural.
Okay.
So we are
Well,
left
thank you
with the
again,
question-
everybody. Yeah.
We are left with the question, who is controlling who, right?
Yeah.
Now this is bothering me. I'm gonna sleep over this, and then I'm tempted to say tonight, those two guys here, the editors, are the video makers, are the final control layer, because Robert has composed and each of us has responded. And then what they have done with his music and with our contributions is the end result of the video is, and we have not seen anything. We've not exchanged any information, no feedback, nothing at all. We know that we've been filmed during the recording session at Pavan. We knew that those two guys with the mask were going everywhere. And then you put it in the hands of gods, and you don't know what's kind.
Correct, but the two filmmakers are also controlled by the material that is given to them.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the one thing I would say, because yeah, we're still responding to it. It's
Yes.
definitely a direct response to it. It's not completely free. So
It's this
this is
like,
definitely one of the most collaborative projects that I've done. Everything does feel very collaborative. Deepesh?
there's this cycle. There is no what do you say? There is no primal movement. I don't think there is. Like, there's this cycle that's happening. I'm sure when Robert, when you were composing, you were inspired by something else. Then your composition inspired the musicians, and then the musicians inspire us, and we also get inspired by other things. And then I remember during some of the shoots, the musicians or who are the artists would come and ask us, and we would give them also. Sometimes we tell them what to do, and then so it's this back and forth. And in the end, if you try to trace it back, you're not going to find anything.
Okay, so if for next week, keep advertising, keep having be active on social media. That's the thing to do nowadays.
Sorry for the record. My mom, who lives in the center-south of Italy, Abruzzo, is close to Rome, Adriatic coast. She's 89. She manages, I don't know how, to get into Facebook, get the website, and finally tonight she manages to watch Dennis' episode, and she's sending messages over messages, trumpets and applause, etc. And she's writing 10 lode all'artista. 10 lode is the highest grade, the highest score with distinctions to the artist. And for her is Robert, of course, because she knows him, Dennis, and the video makers. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad she got to watch it.
Join the chat, but she doesn't get how to do it. So be contented that she watched the video, and she's sending her congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. How do you say thank you in Italian? Is it grazie?
Grazie, yes.
Grazie.
Oh, this I didn't do it. This you do it.
Okay. Any other thoughts before we wrap up and see you next week? Great then. Next week, episode 3
with
Roberto
at the flute. Yeah.
See you then.
John, see you next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.